Add to stream. Okay, there it's blue now. Oh, because I am live. Um, all right. Let me just see if I can hear myself. So we said that every sentence has a complete subject as well as a predicate. And with the complete subject, we say that it is basically it tells us who or what is doing something. All right. So we say that it can be one word, right, with a complete subject, or it can be more than one word. All right. So can you guys hear me now? So we say that when it comes to a complete subject, right, it tells us who or what is doing something. And it can be one word or it can be more than one word. For example, she sleeps a lot. So this is now where we will be seeing that a subject can either be one word or it can be more than one word, right? So for example, she, right? She is our subject and she is the person, or it's basically who is doing something, right? So instead of even saying the person's name, we can just say she, or we can say Ella, or we can say the person's specific name, or we can even say the dog or something, but she sleeps a lot, which means that she is the subject who is doing something. Then we have also another example, because we said that when it comes to the subject, then it can be either one word or it can be more than one word, right? So now we can even say her friend, right, can also be a subject. So her friend can also be a subject. So we can say that her friend sleeps a lot. So basically, the question is then who sleeps a lot, right? Or who is doing something. So the action that is being done is sleeps a lot, right? So which means that our subject, which is more than one word, is her friend. Then we have another one, which is like her best friend sleeps a lot, right? And her best friend is basically our subject, right? So it can either be she or it can be her friend, or it can be her best friend. That is basically the subject that tells us who is doing something, right? And like we said, it can be one word or it can be more than one word, right? That basically shows or tells us who is doing something. So we are doing our grade 5 as well as grade 6 lesson on subject and predicate. So once again, we would like to apologize for the technical issues that we have experienced. So we are combining grade 5 as well as the grade 6 class on subject and predicate. So just thank you very much for everybody's patience. All right, so if we look at our subjects, right, which is she, her friend, as well as her best friend, right? Each one of these subjects within these sentences, it tells us who sleeps a lot. It basically tells us who is doing something, right? And once again, we said that in each sentence, right, every sentence has a complete subject and it has a complete predicate, right? And we're going to still find out what the predicate is, but for now, we are focusing on a subject, and we see that a complete subject, it tells us who or what is doing something, and it can be one word or it can be more than one word, right? And in this case, she, right, it basically tells us who sleeps a lot, right? It can be she that sleeps a lot, or her friend sleeps a lot, or it can be her best friend that sleeps a lot. But basically, the subject within that three sentences, it tells us who sleeps a lot, who is doing something, right? And within a sentence, we have basically someone or something that does something or who is doing something. And then we also have the specific action that the specific person or thing is doing. All right. Then also when it comes to a predicate, right? So within a complete sentence, right? So within a complete sentence, we also have a predicate. So we have a subject which tells us who or what is doing something. And then we have a predicate, right? And a complete predicate, it tells what the subject is doing. So it can either tell us what the person is doing or it can tell us what the thing is doing, right? And basically, the predicate is a verb, right? So the predicate, it is the verb plus any other word that tells more about it. So when it comes to the predicate, then it can be one word or it can be more than one word. And now if we look at this example, it says her friend sleeps. So her friend sleeps. So basically within the sentence, right, we said that the predicate, it tells us what the subject is doing. And if we were to identify the subject, right, and then we would say her friend is the subject, right? But now we need to say what the person is doing. So which means that we need to say that the friend sleeps. So sleeps is our predicate. And the predicate, like we said, is the verb. It plus it is any other word that tells you more about it, right? It says her friend sleeps a lot. So her friend sleeps a lot. And within the sentence, if we were to identify the predicate, or basically let's say the verb, then we can even say it is sleeps a lot, right? Because now it is the verb plus any other word that tells us more about the specific subject, right? So we say that her friend is basically our subject, right? It tells us what is or who, what or who is doing something. And we say that the predicate is the verb, right? And the verb is the action or doing word. And it's telling us who or what is doing so, not who or what is doing so. It's telling us um what the person or thing is doing. And in this case, we are specifically saying that sleeps is our verb, or sleeps is our predicate. But when it comes to the predicate, right, they say that it is the verb, which is the doing word or the action, plus any other words that tells us more about the subject, right? And in our second sentence, it is sleeps a lot. And sleeps a lot is our it's our predicate, right? Because it tells us more about our subject. Then here it says her friend sleeps a lot on the weekend. So her friend being the subject, and then sleeps a lot being the predicate, right? So even here it says we can even say sleeps a lot on a weekend because it tells us more about the subject. So basically, each one of our predicates, right, it tells us what the friend does or what her friend does, because her friend is our specific subject. All right. So we basically see that a subject, it tells us who or what is doing something, and it can be one word or it can be more than one word. And our predicate, it tells us what the subject is doing, and that is the verb plus any other words that tells us more about it, right? All right, so if we quickly do one example, right, or an activity, we need to select one word that makes up a complete subject, right? It says Eve will paint in her studio this evening. So Eve will paint in her studio this evening. So basically, our if we were to select our subject, right? So if we were to select our subject, and then we would say our subject is Eve. Because now you're asking yourself, who will paint in her studio this evening? Because our subject, it basically tells us who or what is doing something. So you ask yourself who, or you ask yourself what is doing something. So which means that Eve is our subject, right? It tells us who is doing something. It says select the 6 words that make up the complete predicate. Remember, we said a predicate, right? It is a verb plus any other words that tells us more about that specific subject, right? Or it tells us about it, which is the subject. So it can be one word or it can be more than one word. So in this case, they are not telling us to select 6 words that make up a complete predicate. So the 6 words that make up a complete predicate. So it says Charlie will elaborate on his idea later. So Charlie will elaborate on his idea later. And if we select our 6-word predicate, right, then we will say it is will elaborate on his idea later. And that is 6 words because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words. And that basically makes up our complete predicate. And of course, Charlie is our subject, right? Because basically, Charlie is who the sentence is about, or who we are talking about, or who is doing the action. All right, so now we're going on to our test. So we're going to have to select one word that makes up the complete subject. So only one word that makes up the complete subject. Ellen served yesterday morning at Rincon Point. So Ellen served yesterday morning at Rincon Park. So we need to say, or we need to select the complete subject. So the complete subject, is it Ellen that is doing something, or is it served that is doing something? So is it Ellen or served? So we need to select the one word that makes up the complete sentence. And when we select the subject, right, then we basically need to ask ourselves who is doing something or what is doing something. All right, so if we select our our subject, and then we will select Ellen. Right? So Ellen being the subject. The correspondent filed a story from Somalia about the food shortage. So the correspondent filed a story from Somalia about the food shortage. So we need to select 2 words that makes up a complete subject. 2 words. Is it from Somalia or is it the correspondent? So we need to select the 2 words that makes up the complete sentence. Subject, sorry. So the subject within the sentence. So is it from Somalia or is it the correspondent? All right, and if we select the correct complete subject, and then we will say it is the correspondent, right? Because that is basically telling us who filed a story from Somalia. So the correspondent is the one who filed a story from Somalia about food shortage. And then we need to select 2 words that make up the complete subject. Many employers issue paychecks directly into employees' bank accounts. So many employers issue paychecks directly into employees' bank accounts? So we need to select two words that make up the complete subject. So is it many? Is it many employers, or is it bank accounts? And if we select the two words that make up the complete subject, and then we will say many employers, right? Because now we're asking ourselves who issued paychecks directly into employees' bank accounts. So who? It is many employers. They issue paychecks directly into employees' bank accounts. Because that is the two words that we are selecting to complete our subject that tells us who is doing something. And many employers are correct. Right? So now we're going to identify basically a simple subject as well as a predicate of a sentence, right? And we said that a subject, it tells us who or what is doing something. And a simple subject, it tells us who or what is also doing something, but it is just the subject, noun, or pronoun without any other words that tells us more about it. Right? So which means that if we look at our sentences, it's she sleeps a lot. So which means that she is our subject, right? Because the simple subject, it tells us who or it tells us what is doing something. And when it comes to the simple subject, then it is just the subject noun or it is the pronoun without any other words that tells us more about it. And then when it comes to the predicate, right, the simple predicate, because now we're going over a simple subject as well as a simple predicate. And a simple predicate, it tells us what the subject is doing. And with a simple predicate, it is just the verb without any other words that tells us more about it. And remember earlier on, we said that a predicate, it can be the verb plus any other words that tells us more about the subject. But in this case, a simple predicate, it is basically only the verb without any other words that tells us more about the subject. All right, so we're going to the test and we're only going to do, oopsie. So we need to select the simple subject, right? And our simple subject, it says, Sancho woke up from a nightmare. So our simple subject, is it Sancho or is it nightmare? So is it Sancho or is it nightmare? And if we select our simple subject, and then we will choose Sancho. He circled his favorite line of a poem or of the poem. We need to select the simple predicate. Remember, we said the simple predicate is only the verb without all the other extra things it tells us about the subject. Is it circled or poem? And if we select it, we can say circled, right? Something that he did. All right, so basically, that is now the end of our lesson on subject and predicate. We say that a subject, it tells us who or what is doing something, and a predicate, it is basically the action that the subject does, right? And all the other words that tells us more about it. Once again, we would like to apologize for our technical issues that we have experienced. And thank you very much for you guys' patience. Um, this is now going to be the end of our lesson on subject and predicate for both grade 5 and grade 6. The grade 5 as well as the grade 6. Till next time, I really hope you're going to have a good day further. Goodbye.